Gary Langford, painter, writer, mostly a writer all my life. Started in Christchurch, New Zealand, the earthquake city of the world. One of the most beautiful books of poetry I wrote was based on the earthquake. However, the first story I wrote was in my last year at school. So there's all sorts of possibilities in the creative world. As a preschooler, I was just like my granddaughters actually. She had an interest in sketching when she hadn't even gone to school. And I thought, oh gee, that's a bit like me. Poor little thing. No, she's good at sketching, and I was at preschool, but the creative aspect was mostly oral storytelling. So I only lasted a morning, and Mum was rung up and told to come round and get me and take me home, because I was a brainy little sketcher. I could read, I could write, and I could do mathematics. So I was much more interested in doing art. And initially, as I'm saying, it was oral art. Did it all through the mouth, and I never lost that all my life. So that when I was a writer-teacher, or a university lecturer as they call it, I lectured without notes for nearly 30 years because I didn't need them. My students, or the hordes, came to see me because I was reasonably good at art. Plus, I had a kindness for them. This is how I start paintings. I start the sketches just in pencil, and you rummage through them, and this is how all artists have slightly different ways of doing it, but they all do start with sketches. Some do it on canvas. I mean, you look at that and you wouldn't even think that that was going to be a sketch on food, but I lost interest in that, so it will never happen. But one that is now painted is this one here, and all I sketched was a table in a cafe, because I looked at the table and I could see these little configurations and drew them in and got interested in staring at all these possible human beings and painted them. And why the end painting looks so good is because I only used one colour that I might do on a pure dark canvas, and I'll just put in, so it's a bit like a human being with eyes down a bunker, because I actually sketched that when I walked through a bunker that was used in World War II, and I thought, gee, that could easily be a painting. And that's how many painters, including myself, get their ideas from. They just go into the natural world and they take what's there and convert it into, it's the same with writing. You just convert them into the stories you want to tell, and in a painter's term, that's the story he or she wants to tell at that time. And there can be true beauty in it, or as I said earlier, it can be ugly too. Depends on the emotion and what the painter's trying to capture. I've had 41 books published. So I've written books from the time I was, my first book was published when I was still at uni doing degrees. But even as a student, I got my own university to change some of the regulations because I was so good at talking. But the other factor was that I'd written, the first stuff written on television in New Zealand in colour, I wrote. And I tried to use that strength to help change the exam system, which was compulsory at universities. Now I was really good at it, but I knew most students weren't. So I changed it, and as an academic, not once in my life did I sit an exam. And yet I had those hordes, year after year, from a BA to a PhD. And one of the key factors was I was the writer. Well, it's somewhere between what you call abstract art. So, well, if you look at a landscape, because one or two of these paintings are close on landscapes, but they're not landscapes because I humanise them. So I go from, say, a landscape painter into an abstract, where I put these things into it to give it what I feel is more emotion, because my father was great at sketching, but in his life he only ever did 4 paintings because he just lost confidence in himself. And so yeah, much of it I've probably inherited. just as it may be true that my granddaughters have inherited an ability with art, but it still comes down to what you do with that ability. Now, I had it, but I did a lot with it, and all this initial period was to write for money, because when I was at uni, my daughter was born, so I needed a regular living. Now, I was on a scholarship, but it wasn't enough money. So that's really why I started writing more seriously, and my first novel was published when we arrived in Sydney in 1974, and got, I think that won an award too, but the sales were good at it. I don't remember exactly, because it's not that important to me. But the novel I enjoyed writing, and it captured the feeling of Sydney, such as my first go on the train. Now, I put that into the novel because a little boy on the train, he's about 5, had written in the dust in the window, "my dog," and he'd spelt it M-I-D-O-G. And I thought, what a clever kid. But he got belted by his mother, or hit. And I said, "Oh, I don't think you should do that." "Oh no." I said, "That's a clever boy." And she said, "He spelt it wrong." And I said, "Oh no, phonetically he spelt it correctly." And I said, so I wouldn't get too carried away, I'd just calm down. So you could see I was beginning to have my life as a teacher, even when I was really a writer. But I put it in the novel, exactly that. Well, I like painting more than writing, really. Even though I've had all those books published since 2010, that's because I've had the time. You understand why I retired or left university at 56? Well, it was important to me that age. I'd had 30 years and nearly all of it on the one campus, and I'd had enough. And because I didn't like what the university was doing, creativity seemed to be less important. So I thought, well, all these degrees are built around me, so all the money you make, I'll go. Since you're not listening to me, you're turning deaf. And I do not like deaf academics, as I call them through my novels. They are academics who might have bits of paper, as I call degrees, but they are not great teachers. Whereas the professors I got on the best with were all good teachers.